Hello, my name is Mr. Otubaga. This is my third year at Travis. I'm part of the social studies team. I'm also a football coach and a basketball coach. And today I am going to be presenting on AI integration in the classroom. All right, so the whole goal of this is basically how I utilize AI. So the way that I utilize AI is for enhancing student engagement, differentiation, which I'm going to talk a lot about, and also reducing workloads. And then this whole presentation could be summed up by the second bullet point. So by attaching a source to the AI, I'm able to basically create tailored information for my students through different lexile levels or assessments or what it may be. I'm able to, because of attaching a source, and then a source could be just a reading material that they're covering. It could be an article, etc. Just something that the students are doing in the classroom. By attaching that to the AI, I'm able to create tailored information to them. All right, so in my classroom, at the beginning of the year, I go through a informal or formal assessment to understand the kids a little bit more. That informal question could be a questionnaire or just something what they've learned in the past about world geography. So for me to get a better understanding. So I place them into different buckets. And while I'm also going through this assessment, I'm also trying to identify their reading level, their comprehension level, and I'll place them into 3 buckets: the 1300 lexile levels, the 1400 lexile levels, and the 1500 lexile levels. By having them in these 3 different buckets, I can now tailor instruction specifically to them, and I call that true differentiations. So let me give you an example. So flashcards are a fundamental part of my class. At the beginning of every chapter, our curriculum, our book gives us a set of flashcards those set of flashcards permeates through the chapter. So they're gonna see those flashcards over and over again. So at the beginning of the lesson or my warm-up, they'll consistently go through flashcards. With the AI, I'm able to plug in the terms and the definition with the AI and ask it to change the lexile level to meet the standards of the child. So if you have certain students that are 1300 level and they're struggling with the reading, or 1400 level, they're a little bit intermediate or advanced, I can now be able to tell the AI to change the lexile level and then be able to give it to the child to make sure that they're adapting to their learning habits, their reading habits, learning level. All right, so the benefit of that is better comprehension and deeper engagement. So let me give an example of what I mean by the different lexile levels and the change and how the AI will change it. So the term is pull factor, and then that's the definition. So for a 1300 lexile level is basically just what is the definition of it. But with the 1400 lexile level, it basically increased the rigor of it by changing some of the verbiage to intensive prospects. And then for the 1500 lexile level, now you have more harder words like enticing, dynamism, alluring, congenial. So you could tell from how the actual term and definition advanced, the vocab, the definition has been increased in rigor. All right, so throughout this presentations, I have a few you-dos. So these you-dos are something that you could do right now or at your own convenient time. The PowerPoint is available in the PD folder. All right, so some other use cases for this is learning objective, learning intention, success criteria. By adding a source, again, which is the information I'm covering in the class, and not the internet, but actual the information I'm covering in the class, I am able to tailor the learning objective, learning intentions, and success criteria specifically for the information I'm covering in my class. All right, so again, this was another you-dos. Again, that's in your PD folder, to where since my primary source, for an example, if I'm covering Jewish migration in the class, I could plug that into ChatGPT and ask it to come up with the learning intentions, the success criteria, that for this particular information that I'm covering in my class, and it will be able to do that. All right, so in my class, my students have to read. It's essential that they have to read. So after their flashcards, they'll read for at least 5 to 8 minutes. Again, one of the problems that I had in the past is when I have different levels of students, where there are certain students that are just complete rock stars, there's some students that are struggling, and then those intermediate students, how can I meet them with where they're at? So with the reading time in my classroom, I could adjust the lexile level while they're still reading the exact same content information, but now the different levels or the different reading levels is now engaging them to be able to be more interested, especially for those higher levels or those intermediate kids in my class. So that has been something that's been beneficial to where I've gotten more engagement by changing a different lexile level, and they still are able to communicate with each other after they finish reading the information. So another thing in my classroom is Socratic questions. Those are big because after the students read the information in the classroom, I want to get an understanding. Did they understand the information? So Socratic questions. Again, the way that I do that is having the source, getting the AI to attach to that source, and then asking the AI to come up with a Socratic question. And that Socratic question is what I provide to the students to gauge if they're able to retain the information that they just read. And then the fun part of my class are the debate questions. So after the students have read the information, and after we went through the Socratic question, now we debate. I've seen in my classroom that the students, when they're able to absorb the information and then take ownership of the information, now they're able to then interact with their fellow peers and talk about the information. So by having debate question, which was created by the AI, they take full ownership and be able to express themselves about the information that we cover in the class. And the way that I judge my classes as my students are leaving, are they still bantering with each other about the information? If they're still talking and interacting about the debate question of the day, then I know that the information that I taught them in that particular class was successful. All right, so this next couple of slides are just talking about how the AI adjusts the different lexile levels for the reading. All right. So if you've been paying attention, I've been talking about source, having a source. That's a key and important thing with the AI. By adding a source to the AI before you give it an instruction, what that does is it minimizes to eliminate hallucination. Hallucination is when the AI, if you give it a prompt without any type of source, what the AI would do is it will go towards the internet and pull information from the internet and then provide you that information without vetting it, without basically doing any due diligence. So by having a source and containing it with that source, you're not telling it to go to the internet, but actually derive the information from that source. That will help stop hallucination. Hallucination is when the AI model generates incorrect information by going towards the internet rather than it being dependent on a source. So here's some of the questions that I'm able to come up with by attaching it with a source. Like when we're covering information in my classroom and we're going through a particular reading, I'll ask the AI to come up with open-ended questions, critical thinking questions, compare and contrast questions, first principle questions, inferencing questions. And then these last two are questions that I'm really laser focused on right now with the AI. High order thinking questions. So what are the high order thinking questions that the AI could come up with? And these are specifically tailored towards my 1500 lexile levels in my classroom to basically get them to think a little bit more about the information that we're covering in class. And then the next one that I'm also concentrating on in my classroom is synthesizing questions. This synthesized questions is basically when you're able to combine two different things that you've learned or have learned in the past, and then put them together and try to come up with new way of thinking because of you have those previous information. So these two type of questions were harder for me to come up with in the past just by myself, but now having this tool, I'll be able to come up with these new specific questions that are tailored towards those higher end students, again, to meet them where they're at and try to grow them. All right, so this is another you-do that's also part of the presentation. So this is something that you could just click on the link, copy the prompt, and then copy the source material, and then the AI will do the rest. Okay, so the next part of the presentation is feedback. In my classroom, I minimally do multiple choice tests. A lot of the questions that my students have to answer open-ended questions to where they have to express themselves about the information they cover in my class. But I have 100+ students. How can I possibly grade 30 questions, open-ended questions that my students have to answer? That's extremely hard for 100+ students. So what I do is I feed that assignment that my kids have turned in into the AI, and I ask it to create personal feedbacks on the information that they have done, the information that they've submitted to me. So by having a source, by having a rubric, now the source is the information that the AI is going to be deriving information from. The rubric is essentially the instruction, and then the actual assignment is what is utilizing those first two to grade. Now it could create a grading system to where it'll be reliable, and then the students can get actual good feedback from the information. So for an example, let's say Ms. LeBlanc turned in assignments, so the AI will say, Ms. LeBlanc, according to the text, you missed this question, and then it will be able to talk about specifically why they missed the question, and also be able to tell them how they can improve as well. So it will be able to do that, and it will be able to grade information for you. Okay, DLAs. Another thing that I use it for is how do I get my kids to do better on their DLA test? So what I do is I'll look at previous DLAs, and I'll look at the structure of how the questions are being answered. Majority of times when I talk to my students, the DLA information is not really difficult because we're covering our classroom. It's the structure of how the questions are related to them is what they usually have a problem with. So by looking at previous DLAs and looking at how it is structured, I could then input that information with the AI and the new content or the new information I'm covering in my class, and I could tell the AI, look at this previous question, here's the information that I'm covering in my class, and now come up with the same similar structured questions as the DLA. So when my students look at when they're taking DLAs, those type of questions are jarring to them because they're familiar with it because we did it as our warm-up or our exit ticket or whatever. So their DLA questions aren't as jarring to them. Information they should know it because we're covering class, but the structure of the questions, they're getting more familiar with it because of this concept of utilizing previous DLAs, the information, and then combining it together. All right, the next part is mini projects. So after we finish covering a particular unit or chapter in my classroom, I have mini projects. So these are 2 days dedicated to review the information that they just learned. So what I do is that I'll ask the AI, hey, I'm about to review this concept that we just covered. How would you structure, or if I already know what I'm gonna do, but how would you structure a mini project that will take 2 days, 45 minutes within each day? How would you structure it? And then it'll go, and I'll tell it to segment the time. So what I mean by that is actually a football concept is where you have 5 minutes for this, 10 minutes for this, 15 minutes for this, and just run it off to like 45 minutes or however long that I wanted to, and it'll be able to do that. How I get a little bit more creative with it is that, let's say during the time that I was covering a specific material in my classroom, and I felt that my students just it didn't click with them. During the mini project, what I'll do is I'll tell the AI spend more segment time or spend more time emphasizing this specific material to review it a little bit over. So it will be able to do that. So instead of something that will brush over within 10 minutes, I'll say spend 15 minutes or 20 minutes dedicated to this material that I felt that my students did not really master. And then it will be able to do that as well by attaching more segment time. All right. So when I first started teaching 8 years ago, one of the things that was pushed upon like teachers were evidence-based strategy. You have to utilize evidence-based strategy. So now that is possible at real time. So imagine a peer-reviewed article on a new evidence-based strategy has been published and we have access to it. And you're interested in it and you just want to see how could it be, how would it look in your classroom? Now, that could potentially happen as soon as possible. If you're able to get an evidence-based strategy that you feel confident in and you want to try to implement it, you don't want to spend like the summer trying to create the information, well, you can plug that information into the AI and say that this is the information I'm going to be covering in the next couple of weeks. Can you utilize this new evidence-based strategy and can you tailor it to how I teach? So if that's flashcards or whatever that you do in your classroom, and then it'll be able to tailor it to that, and you could then figure out, can that be potentially useful in your classroom? Okay, all right, so this is part of the presentation where I transition a little bit outside of just social studies and I talk, not touch on other subjects. So I was preparing for this presentation. I was trying to ask, can you provide me five problems that I will typically find in a algebra class? And it was able to do that. But what I asked it to do is, can you increase the rigor of these questions? So then it was able to do that. So it did the exact same structure of questions, but then what it did was just improve the rigor of the questions. And then something that I asked it to do is, I thought about if our students were at home and they had one of these questions and you're not right there with them, the teacher's not right there with them, I asked the AI, can you help me walk through how to answer this particular question without giving me the answer? And it was able to do that, and I think this is an extremely effective tool, especially for students when they're at home and they're not right next to you to be able to help them out. So I specifically asked it for number 2. I told the AI, here's the problem. Can you give me the step-by-step on how to solve the problem without giving me the answer? And it did that, and it walked it through, I think, 6 steps. It was able to provide me the information that I need to solve the problem. And I did the exact same thing with biology. I asked it, give me 3 questions that I could potentially see in a high school biology class, and it did that. And then I asked it, could you help me walk through how to solve number 2, which is basically a TT-PP graph? And then it went and walked me through the step-by-step on how to be able to solve that. All right, so this looked like a lot, but it's purposeful. So I went into English, and one of my favorite poems is Maya Angelou Cage Birds. And I asked the AI, what in a high school environment, what can you give me, or what can I teach my kids about Maya Angelou's Cage Birds? And this is all the information towards the right that it was able to give me. So it said I could talk about summarization to my students, imagery, symbolism, hope and resilience, oppression and resistance, and it just basically said that these are the information that you could talk about specifically with this poem. So this is just a great example of when you have a source, you could tell it to provide me X, Y, and Z, and then it'll be able to do that. All right, so Something else that I was curious about is podcasts. Some of my students just refuse to read or just struggle with that, and I was thinking about what's another way that I can get them to still be engaged with the material and learn the information. And now if I have a source, again, like a reading or whatnot, or article, I could plug that into the AI, and I can ask it to create a podcast for me, and it will do that. And the podcast that will create is going to be a male and a female voice, and they will be talking through the actual information that the source material that I provided it. So it will be a digital male and female, not real people, but digital male and female, and they'll be talking, interacting with each other, and actually going back and forth about the source material that I provide them. So so there's a YouTube video that you could do if you're interested in that. It's a YouTube video that could walk you through that process. And Khan Academy has their own AI. It's called Khan Amigo. 60 Minutes covered it, and they talked about how you could utilize their version of AI in their classroom, and also is something that we could use as well. Something that I am extremely curious about that I think has a lot of potential is the advanced voice with ChatGPT. Again, by providing a source, I could see our students utilizing that at home, especially if they have like questions about certain subject matters or material that they don't remember in the classroom. They'll be able to use the advanced voice to be able to get answers to certain things. All right, so this is just basically walking you through how to do the podcast. And again, this is available on the PD folder. All right, so the next thing I asked the AI to do is, what if we have students that have learning conditions? How can you adapt to that? And I try to make sure to minimize it, because sometimes the information that it could provide to you can be so vast. So I told her, just give me a bullet point of how can you adapt to learning conditions. So for example, if you have students that are ELL or gifted and talented, ADHD, dyslexia, etc., you can tailor the information that you're covering in your class to those students. Okay, you can tailor those informations in your class to those students. It doesn't matter if they have anxiety or so on and so forth. And I try to just restrict it to not to be too overwhelming, but it will be able to do a lot more advanced than a lot more information than this. Okay, so now my curiosity. I'm trying. So something that I was curious about is, what if individuals in the past, how could they teach my class? How would Aristotle, Plato, how would they teach information in my class? Especially, I'm a history guy, so how would they teach history in my class? So you can imagine this for like John Nash for math, or whoever, Einstein or whatever. Like, how would they teach information in my class? Since there's so much information about them in the past, information that they written, or information about their life, etc. How the way that they produce things or said things, how would they teach my class? And I did that with Aristotle. I provided with a unit that I'm currently covering, and I said, what information would Aristotle, how would he teach in my class? And the AI was able to provide me learning intentions, success criteria, etc. It provided me warm-up information. It provided me actual assignment for the students to do, exit tickets, and so on and so forth. And then more importantly than that, it was able to provide me references so I could vet it, to actually say, for me to actually put any validity into it. And it provided me like references to books and articles and so on and so forth, to where it felt confidence to say that this is what presumably this individual would have been able to say in my class or teach the class. All right, so the future of this, like, how would this change the classroom environment? All right, so in the next few years, you're gonna be hearing a terminology called agent. Agent is gonna be an AI to where it adapt to you in real time, okay? So AI specifically targeted to help you and adapt to you in real time. So how would this work in a classroom environment? So imagine a second grader, third grader having their own agent. And then the agent itself is coming up with the actual reading material, the actual assignment, grading the assignment, inputting the assignment into Skyward, and doing basically everything, gamifying the assignment for the student is big. And the AI or the agent now is gonna be the actual teacher in the classroom. So that is probably gonna be the future of this thing, to where the actual students would be more listening to the AI on their earbuds, so and the AI will be the one that's teaching them and adapting to them. So imagine if a child has dyslexia, instead of listening to you, they'll be listening to the agent, and the agent will be tailoring the information to them, given whatever curriculum that the school district gives to the AI to be able to do. So that's what it will be doing in the next 5 to 10 years from now. All right. So what caused me to go and basically be more curious about this? Start with this book, and I would recommend this book if you're somebody as a reader. It's called Becoming Wave. It's a book that basically talks about how it started. The person that actually wrote the book, Mustafa, he was an individual that started AI, one of the individuals that started AI, and then it talks about how it will change just the everyday environment, including education in the future as well. All right, that's it. Cool. Is there any questions?